Okay, this is our first recording of the reading for The Art of Passing the Buck, The Secrets of Wills and Trusts by Charles Arthur. So y'all, the book is downloaded. Hopefully you have it up and you will be following along. It is in the folder called Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1. The PDF is pinned and somewhere up in the middle there. So if you have not downloaded it already, please go do that. And we will start at Chapter 1. Let's see. Okay. Chapter 1, the core issue / results. To see why ignorance is not bliss when it comes to inheritance, please read and carefully consider the following item. If only he cared. In an article in the Los Angeles Times, the trust grantor, the one who started the trust, remarried a longtime girlfriend and died suddenly several weeks later. The new wife inherited the estate. Since the declaration of trust restricted her use of neither trust principal nor income, she was able to do as she chose. She chose to deprive the original beneficiaries, her dead husband's children, of their rightful inheritance. When she was finally expensively forced into court by the original beneficiaries and made to produce the trust documents, they found she had been given carte blanche with all funds, named her relatives as new beneficiaries, and planned to pay the original beneficiaries a pittance eventually. The column writer advises that this could have been avoided if the husband named both his wife and a co-trustee to the estate. This would restrain her actions as she needed the co-trustee to cooperate before she could use funds. The bottom line in the article, written to the ex-wife, the mother of the children suing the estate, is expressed clearly in these two sentences. One would like to think the dear departed didn't know his wife was not trustworthy, but that rather strains credulity. It's more likely that for whatever reason, he didn't care enough about making sure your kids got an inheritance to put sufficient checks and balances on her. And here's another point to ponder. This stems from what might be termed a bypass trust, although the column writer wasn't sure, which is another name for the revocable living trust. When the grantor of a revocable living trust passes on, the trust automatically turns into an irrevocable trust. Why? Because the grantor is no longer alive to change his or her mind. And what is written in the Declaration of Trust, from now on referred to as trust indenture or just indenture, is cast in stone. In reviewing some revocable living trusts, we discovered they are weak, lack direction, and in general, the trust grantor casually assigns funds after his or her death. We suggest that if even a revocable living trust in which it states the trust grantor is the primary focus of the receipt of funds until his or her death, be written from the view of irrevocability. The trust grantor needs to consider the results of nonchalant assignments and to ensure the beneficiaries' needs are more broadly and seriously addressed. There is also another choice set up as a testamentary trust, with people selected as trustees. When you pass on, the assets are then placed into this newly created irrevocable trust. It is administered by a board of trustees or only one trustee, preferably not a family member, whose job it is to take care of all the beneficiaries. Okay, now we're on to chapter 2. What is a trust? Before we go on much further, though, we need to make sure you understand what a trust is. Refer to figures 1 and 2. A trust is a collection of assets transferred into financial accounts under the name of a family trust. For example, the name of the trust might be the Smith Family Trust. These assets, now identified as belonging to the Smith Family Trust, are managed for the benefit of Smith family members or other appointed people and groups. All recipients of goods or funds are identified as beneficiaries. They receive the benefits of the trust, which may be assets kept or cash flow generated. The relationships of the beneficiaries to the trust and how these benefits are given to them control what type of trust is set up. The collection of transferred assets, identified as corpus, can be investments, rental property, promissory notes, business ventures, etc., all designed or selected to produce a cash flow for the beneficiaries. Some trusts pay most of the funds at the death of the grantors. From now on, referred to as grantor. And some trusts provide a cash flow to beneficiaries during the lifetime of the grantor. The grantor does not have to die to benefit his or her family. Remember, though, that all trusts become irrevocable on the death of the grantor. Sorry, my dog is like trying to get in my lap here. How does a trust work? There are 2 types of trust, revocable and irrevocable. The living trust is the most common revocable trust type. This means you can revoke the trust at any time. A revocable trust, though, eventually becomes irrevocable. This means the person who set up the trust passed and can no longer change the terms of the trust, thus making it irrevocable. Please refer to the following 2 figures to see how funds flow through these 2 types of trusts. If you would rather not deal with the details, you may turn to Chapter 3 at any time to read about the benefits derived from being born into a trust environment. Grantor/revocable trust, Figure 1. The person, such as the husband and wife who sets up the trust, has assets to establish the initial corpus. This is how the trust is funded. He or she transfers title to the trust. In this diagram, Figure 1, the family trust is set up. The name of this family trust can be the last name of your great-grandmother, or it can be your name. By creating a contract known as a trust indenture, also known as a declaration of trust, a trust is established. The grantor, as the trustee, sets forth the rules and regulations under which he or she agrees to manage funds for the beneficiaries. In a revocable trust, the immediate beneficiary is usually the grantor and spouse, after which are what is known as the contingent beneficiaries. These are those people who receive funds after the grantor passes. During the life of the irrevocable trust, the grantor can give gifts to the contingent beneficiaries, but most of the inheritance remains under the control of the grantors, usually the parents. Acting as the trustee, the grantor trusts Acting as the trustee, the grantor trust financial accounts by opening them in the name of the family trust. For funds to pass without going through probate, the grantor adds the name of the successor trustee to these bank accounts. What in the heck? So, sorry. Let me close the door. Okay, let's try this again. Let me start over. For funds to pass without going through the probate, the grantor adds the name of the successor trustee to these bank accounts. So when the grantor passes on, the successor trustee becomes the trustee with signature power on the trust accounts. If this step is not taken, then the revocable trust may need to go through probate to allow the bank to recognize the signature of the successor trustee. Figure 1, revocable/living trust. The most common type of revocable trust is a living trust. Irrevocable trust. The grantor can establish an irrevocable trust at any time during his or her life. Once he or she places funds into the trust, that person no longer owns them. The funds are the responsibility of the trustees in the name of the trust, and the grantor is neither responsible for them nor pays taxes on any increase. The beneficiaries are now eligible for distribution and pay taxes on what they receive. They do not need to wait until the grantor passes. They can also take part in the financial decisions of the trust if the trustees invite them to do so, and they interact with the trustees chosen to ensure their welfare. The role of the grantor in his or her relationship to the beneficiaries changes. Without direct financial control over the trust assets, the grantor can remain as an advisor to the board of trustees. If he or she so chooses, the grantor can keep control over the distribution throughout his or her lifetime. We will go into more detail about that later in this book. With funds in the trust, the trustees invest and manage any income earned. They can sell the initial corpus and buy different assets, or they can administer the original assets. Because the purpose of the trust is to increase assets, and especially the cash flow, the trustees receive a percentage of distribution as an incentive. It is likely that an aggressive board of trustees, or just one trustee, will take action to find strong, profitable investments that have a reasonable margin of safety. The object is to ensure the welfare of the beneficiaries, and so profits produced from the investments the trust holds are either reinvested or the beneficiaries receive some or all of the profits. General summary of the trust basics. The grantor puts his or her assets into the trust, and either the grantor acting as trustee or the trustees then invest the funds. When there is a payout of the investments, the funds go directly into the trust bank account, where they are distributed to the beneficiaries. In a revocable trust, the beneficiary or beneficiaries is the grantor. In an irrevocable trust, the beneficiaries are usually the children and or close relatives of the grantor. In both cases, a percentage of the profits can be reinvested. A little beyond basic. The following section about divided title and the U.S. Constitution is for those who want to explore the subject of trust mechanics and definitions more deeply. For those who feel you are not ready for more details about the mechanics of inheritance and would like to move into a more friendly presentation, please go to Chapter 3. In Chapter 3, we discuss what life might be like if you were a member of a strong trust group, which offered both financial security and ample mentoring. The trust described mostly applies to an irrevocable private trust where trustees may personally interact with and be attentive to the beneficiaries. Here you will discover why those with enough funds are more likely to be successful. When you feel more comfortable with the ideas of inheritance, we invite you to return to this chapter to read this key additional information. Divided title and the U.S. Constitution. The fundamental feature of any trust is the division of full title, complete ownership, of a particular property into legal title, technical ownership, and equitable title, the beneficial right to possess and use the particular property. Trustees retain legal title to the property within the trust and are responsible for administrating and enforcing all trust rules. Beneficiaries receive equitable title to use trust property they do not own, provided they obey all the trust's rules. The United States Constitution declares no state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts. Therefore, when a trust is created without fraud by contract, not statutes, it holds a position in law superior to any state law. In other words, by voluntarily and honestly contracting with your trustee, you establish a lawful trust. No state can then impair or void the obligation you created. Therefore, trust rules stand superior, not only to state constitutional law. They form private law, which operates legally outside the U.S. Constitution, as guaranteed by that document itself. This does not give you any guarantees, though. Your trust can still be challenged whether or not it is set up correctly. You might wonder why this is so important. Consider the ownership of residential property. Once put in a trust, several people have a vested investment. Seizure of that property by the government becomes a greater consideration because it is unknown how many of the beneficiaries will contest the matter and how much money is behind the trust veil. This idea of having the property seized by government authorities is not so uncommon. In fact, eminent domain abuse is widespread. The issue of divided title comes into play concerning whose property is well guarded and whose is not. Trust, what they are and what they are not. Many people think that a trust is a group of stocks, bonds, and other investments held by a trustee to produce money for beneficiaries. This would be the most minimal of definitions. Others believe the rich use trust to evade taxes, and people spend years searching for the tax loopholes. Granted, there are enormous tax advantages to a properly formed and managed irrevocable trust, but tax breaks are only a small part of the picture. The legal and IRS definitions limit the scope and purpose of trusts, and so do not adequately or properly describe them. No wonder people have misconceptions. The business of a trust. A good working definition for our purpose here would be a trust is a particular type of artificial legal entity structured in such a way and for such a purpose that it can legally take advantage of pass-through accounting principles. Pass-through accounting means the proceeds, profits, earnings, etc., pass through it to a secondary recipient, which is the beneficiary, without producing a tax liability for the trust. The business is granted or settled by a trustor, donor, grantor, or settler. Its purpose is to acquire, hold, and increase assets for its beneficiaries. It is administered by a trustee or a board of trustees. Within this business may be many other businesses run by managers who work for it. Or it may hold and manage the stock of other businesses to help them all prosper and produce income. Since the trust is a business, it has its own income flow. The IRS does not classify a trust as a business. We use this term because it is in the business of increasing family assets and should be run accordingly. Types of asset collections. A trust can be complex and diversified, holding stock in various other entities and operating several businesses. On the other hand, a trust may be just one business, one piece of real estate, and or a collection of priceless household goods. It need not be large and complex. Often a small family trust can grow over several generations into a large, smoothly run group of businesses such as the grantor could never have envisioned. The fundamental requirements of a trust are simply that it manages and control assets, and that as a business using pass-through accounting, its structure provides the maximum tax advantages allowable under the law. Again, its entire reason for being is to protect the interests of its beneficiaries. Now let us consider a common legal definition. According to Black's Law Dictionary, first edition, a trust is, quote, an equitable or beneficial right or title to land or other property held for the beneficiary by another person in whom resides the legal title or ownership, unquote. Recognized and enforced by chancery courts, unquote again. Chancery courts are courts of equity. See glossary. Lex provides a second definition of the word trust as, quote, an obligation on a person arising out of a confidence reposed in him to apply property faithfully and accordingly, let me try that again. An obligation on a person arising out of a confidence reposed in him to apply property faithfully and according to such confidence, unquote. The trustee is the one who holds the title to the property due to the, quote, confidence reposed in him, unquote, by the grantor. So the most basic activity is the grantor creates a trust by granting property into the care of a trustee who administers it for the benefit of some third parties known as the beneficiary or beneficiaries. The trustee can be the grantor in a revocable trust. Internal Revenue Code, IRC definition. Ordinary trusts, in general, the term, quote, trust, unquote, has used in the Internal Revenue Code refers to an arrangement granted either by a will or by an intro vivos declaration whereby trustees take title to property for the purpose of protecting or conserving it for the beneficiaries under the ordinary rules applied in chancery or probate courts. Wow, that was a long sentence. Usually the beneficiaries of such a trust do no more than accept the benefits thereof and are not the voluntary planners or creators of the trust arrangement. Generally speaking, an arrangement will is treated as a trust under the Internal Revenue Code. If it can be shown the purpose of the arrangement is to vest in trustees' responsibility for the protection and conservation of property for beneficiaries who cannot share in the discharge of this responsibility, and therefore are not associates in a joint enterprise for the conduct of business for profit. Further, a classic court case defines a particular trust type as, quote, an agreement by which the property of a syndicate is vested in managers who have absolute control of it and the funds contributed by certificate holders, the latter of whom have merely a right to share in the profits in proportion to their certificate holdings, create a common law trust, unquote. We will enlighten the reader on the common law trust later in this work. And can someone, when we hit the, 7:30 mark, can you guys let me know? Because that's when we're going to stop and then do a Q&A. Chapter 3, Mentors, Money, and Trustees. This chapter addresses mostly situations found in a private trust where trustees may have greater motivation and be more involved with beneficiaries. We describe the ideal here to give you a sense of the possibilities for you and yours. The private trust is not dependent on court-appointed trustees, and beneficial interest is more flexible. Details are found later in this book and in Volume 2. And Volume 2 is very extensive. I haven't even gotten to that one yet. Further, we include the more common irrevocable statutory trusts throughout this book and compare these two asset protection modalities. Windfalls. Sally received a cool $500,000 when her grandmother died. It was arranged that she would get a cash payout every 5 years in increments of $100,000 and $50,000. Sally managed to invest the funds in various projects, but over a 10-year period, she eventually lost all of it. Sally is like many people who receive large sums of money. Most lottery winners have the same fate. 299 out of 300 lose their funds and or lose their friends and become quite distraught and unhappy. Connections. How could this be? Although it seems that everyone dreams of having money, in reality, few keep it. Perhaps it is an evil plot to keep us enslaved, or maybe it is simply a matter of education, training, and most important of all, connections. If Sally had mentors to help her understand money, and especially trustees with investment experience or connections to income streams unknown to most people, perhaps her $500,000 would have doubled or tripled. The sad reality is Sally did not have support to help her multiply the assets. So what does support look like? The ideal is when a parent is well positioned in his or her profession, or perhaps the entire family owns a particular type of business and the children grow up under the guidance of not only the family, but the advisors. J.P. Morgan is one of those people who grew up with connections. His father, a well-placed financier, associated closely with leaders of other countries. J.P. Morgan's father designed a mentorship program for J.P. to provide schooling in various countries so J.P. would learn several languages and meet the children of those in power. At the age of 13, J.P. acted as ambassador, delivering important documents to France. These responsibilities and experiences placed him in various leadership roles in his life. Managing a large sum of money. Managing a large sum of money can be a full-time job. It takes significant experience. Lack of foresight and simply not knowing how to set up and pass on money are the biggest problems with inheritance issues. The rich are well positioned because they understand the importance of mentors, connections in the world of finance and trade, and seasoned trustees. If Sally had only known that a board of trustees could have given her incredible advantages. The magical mentorship. There are many things in life we can buy, but have you ever thought of buying a support system, an entire family, or a bevy of mentors? Pirates invested and vested interest. Perhaps you have never thought about buying support. In fact, what is a support system? It consists of several people who have an interest in seeing that you are successful. The best way to create this support is to reward people who assisted you to achieve success. Examples of such interest include both pirates and pirateers, with everyone involved receiving a share in the gain. It is easy to take this same example and apply it to everyday life. If you have a successful business, then the people who support you are given a piece of the action in the form of bonuses and unexpected rewards. This is about shared victory. Victory comes in all shapes and sizes and is not limited to money. For example, suppose you receive an inheritance that included a large amount of jewelry, far more than you could ever wear. Would you share it with your friends, relatives, and others loyal to you? If the answer is yes, then you already learned how to build the support you need. Swap weakness for strength. But how about buying an entire family? What could an encouraging family do for you that your natural family may not be able to supply? If you come from a dysfunctional family where brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers do not get along, you may be quite willing to trade it for a new set of relatives. So how do you get this family? That will be revealed as we explain the proper structure of a private trust, also known as the common law trust, with its built-in mentors. The advantage of a long-range view. We come now to the core subject, the magical mentor. Mentors sometimes are difficult to find, especially those willing to help you through life. Mentors usually have a long-range view and want to guide and steer you in the right direction. Mentors are often focused in a particular area. For example, if you have a passion for race cars, your mentor would probably be a race car driver or one who could engineer one of the fastest cars in the world. In fact, without a mentor, you would probably never rise to any great competitive status. Of all the people in your life whom you need to help move you forward, the magical mentor is probably the one most key to your personal success in life. Suppose, for instance, that you work a 9-to-5 and you have many friends, but you do not have anybody in the company in which you are employed to give you particular guidance about how to succeed. That is, no one is interested in bringing you up to the top. Adding to this, you have a family which has no interest in your success. This does not mean it is against you. It may mean the family just wants to be happy in life and offers you no guidance. In this case, you probably do not have a strong support or mentors. Tom Stevens and his father. Here is an incredible example of a family support that worked. One of our trustees met Dr. Stevens in 1984 and asked him how it was he became a surgeon. He reported his father was a medical doctor and guided him to take the right classes throughout high school and college. When Dr. Stevens was asked if he ever resented his father's taking control of his life, Dr. Stevens replied he never had any particular idea in mind about what he wanted to do anyway, so his father's guidance was accepted and appreciated. Becoming a doctor was as natural as breathing. At the time, the trustee knew him. Dr. Tom Stevens was the chairman of the surgery department of a Chicago, Illinois hospital. He proved to be fascinating with his marvelous stories about the lives he saved. Foundation elements. If you do not have the father our good doctor had, then you need to create your own reality. First, strategically build your foundation by finding people interested in your goals. If you have a goal of beginning your own clothing design business, you need to get the necessary education, and in that process, find those with compatible goals. These others will share their ideas with you as long as you reciprocate and are generous with your time and enthusiasm. They will be part of your support network. It always helps to have an encouraging family. And as the assets accumulate in your trust, you will be able to acquire a supportive family. So how do you acquire the necessary stuff to gather around you, those people to support you? To build your own reality, you need to accumulate not only people, but also a sufficient cash flow. Contrary to popular opinion, the cash flow comes from people. Other people create money. Money does not happen by itself, so you need to hook up with people who know how to create money to get a cash flow. You will also need to take a risk. This risk could be a small incentive in something as simple as penny stocks, or joining a friend on a business venture where your hard labor generates cash. Whatever it takes, you can assume that a 9-to-5 job in most cases is not just going to get all that you need. Connections. Like Sally, some people are lucky and may inherit the money. Without that magical mentor, though, the money dissipates quickly. Knowing what to invest in and what to avoid takes a good deal of experience. Few people have this background, and so it takes connections to know what to do with an inheritance. Some may win the lottery, as mentioned. After winning the lottery, the statistics show that 299 out of 300 people lose their friends and money at the end of a couple years. And why is that? It is because they do not have that magical mentor who knew how to steer them through the extraordinarily difficult and tricky financial world and tell them how to handle relationships. You need to trust that you can change. If you want to have any sway in this world, you need to have backing that is viable in an ever-changing and complicated society. Let us explore what a perfect support network might look like. Your mother is loving and your father attentive. Your brothers and sisters may be mischievous, but you can trust them. Your mother has connections to financial organizations willing to have you work for them so you can learn the ropes. Your father has international connections, and this allows you to spend summers in some of your high school years in foreign countries, learning to speak other languages. Your father's uncle is an ambassador for the United States to China. He takes you to China a couple times a year. When your family sits down at dinner, both your mother and father tell you from time to time the true history of the world according to the family's interactions with various governments. Also, you go to school with the future heirs of fortunes. In other words, you are born into a network in which you are well connected and from which you are likely to have many mentors. If this is not how you were raised, then you need to reassess your life and get better positioned. Of course, we are not expecting the average person to be able to accumulate the kinds of wealth and power just described, as that took generations. We do expect the ordinary person, though, to hold a vision of the family's future and to realize that perhaps the third or fourth generation from this date could possibly have a life described like this. We realize thinking this way is unpopular. and perhaps even scary, but those in power have held this vision for several generations. So why cannot you? Maybe it is that you simply did not know. So let us assume that this person who is born into this incredible support network is in a position to make a difference in the world. Could he or she have gotten there without great-grandfathers having set up an irrevocable trust? Find the mentor. Few people will take another person under their wing to guide them through life. To get the vision and achieve the long-range goal for the family, you will need to find not only one, but 2 or 3 magical mentors to get you there. Unless you know what you are looking for, though, you may inadvertently overlook the person or persons with the needed information. Thus, the first step in finding these magical mentors is to recognize their qualities. These are people who have substantial experience in life, who also have the motivation to want you to succeed. Like the swashbuckling pirate captain who shares his loot with his rowdy men, you will have to realize that whatever you gain needs to have an upside for those around you who helped you achieve your ambitions. You need to be generous with your time, your information, and perhaps even practice being a mentor to others. If you look around, you may find that not many people have mentors. In fact, it might be a good exercise to do a quick survey among your friends and associates to find out who has taken the time to assist each of them to move forward in life. Mentor qualifications. Mentors are natural teachers. They also understand something about the psychology of pain. For a person to rise to the point where he or she feels confident to guide others, it is usually necessary for the mentor to have lost in some way. Good mentors are those who are not afraid of getting deeply involved. They are familiar with starting from the bottom or having hardship in which they have been thrown off their own paths. Perhaps one of the most important things good mentors should have is tough love, the ability to tell you in a strong but caring way that you must change. You, on the other hand, must have enough brains to comprehend the message and do something about it. Your ability to humbly accept correction without undue upset will earn you respect. Mentors are aware of the bigger picture. They can see your potential and know that if they support you, you can stand up and make a difference for others. Mentorship is about sharing hard-won knowledge, know-how, and skills. Built-in mentor system. The private trust is more likely to have a built-in mentor. To form a trust, the grantor must find 2 people willing to take on the responsibility of the assets of the trust. If your grandmother decides to create a private trust, she chooses one person who is not a family member, and perhaps the other person would be a family member. The co-trustee, who may or may not be a family member, is selected to ensure it takes 2 signatures for all the financial documents. This is a built-in safeguard. If your grandmother chooses these 2 people to be the trustees, though, they automatically become her mentors. Because of retained powers allowed by the Internal Revenue Code, your grandmother can continue making beneficial and investment decisions, and so will be working closely with the trustees. Trusts need beneficiaries, so now she names her children and her grandchildren to reap the rewards of strategic investment planning. As the trust builds its assets and is able to make a beneficial or gift distribution, the beneficiaries become rewarded and now have a vested interest in the success of the trust. What you see is a strong group forming, composed of people motivated to assist the process via a vested interest in a common goal. This, in most cases, brings the family together. To ensure there is sufficient communication among all players, meetings of the Board of Trustees should be held no less than semi-annually. Meetings focus on educating all members of the trust, including beneficiaries, about the investments, the welfare of each other, the long-range goals of the trust, and the social functions of the group. In the beginning stages of the trust, the trustees may not possess any particular great wisdom about finances or legal matters. Each trustee, though, needs to be willing to get involved to understand them. If the trust evolves, the trustees become both more educated and more valuable. In the long run, trustees can develop into parental figures to the beneficiaries, teaching to the trust group. Advisories and legal counselors to the grantor and the beneficiaries function as accountants or have a good grasp of the finances of the trust, and with experience gain a smattering of psychology to counsel with trust members. So trustees become, over time, broad-based persons who have the best interest of all members of the trust in mind, and thus are among the first qualified to become a magical mentor. Buy a family. We mentioned, though, that a person could buy a family. So instead of having the great-grandmother set up the trust, you set up the trust and pack it with your favorite people. Over time, this group becomes vested in the interests of the trust and forms a family. All you need to do is take that risk to find the initial funds to gather magical mentors with connections around you. You may find your forte in real estate, environmental cleanup, or a variety of other areas where risk-taking allows great gain. But first of all, you must realize it can happen, know how it can be created, and want to do it. Yes, it takes money, connections, friends, trust, and the right environment. You also need to become involved in understanding ways that promote vested interest. A corporation, as well as other business forms, promotes this type of interlocking commitment where there is ample reward for all the participants. Leadership. If you are going to pull off your dreams and build a new family or support your current one, you need to develop leadership abilities. This includes consistency, dedication to the goal, and most of all, patience. Evolution. One of the most valuable attributes of the irrevocable common law trust is it provides a strong structure through which a family evolves and grows. Consider for a minute the fractured family that we have today, brothers and sisters scattered. They are in different states, even countries, and have diverse businesses and priorities. In some families, there is only the excuse of holidays to come together, and in other situations, families do not even meet even then. What if the entire family were part of a business, though, and that business was the vested interest of the financial growth of each individual and the family's future? What if, instead of coming together for only holidays, now the family comes together 4 times a year to discuss the trust finances and the education of the future generations? What if one of the brothers starts a new business and it flourishes? Because the trust funded the business to start, now some of the proceeds go back into the trust and are redistributed to the trust members. The same applies to trust members who are aspiring artists or musicians who may be worthy of support. If they become famous, the entire trust membership gains. What if the famous artist Vincent van Gogh was your brother? If this was your family, how interested would you be in the success of your brother's business? Yes, you would be extraordinarily supportive of him. So let us say he had an assistant who became ill. Suddenly, your brother can turn to the trust group, and any member who has some of the qualifications can temporarily take the place of the assistant. Your brother has a resource to ensure his success. Van Gogh never received this support during his entire lifetime. And if this is a family that you bought, you have many people with vested interest in your success as you need. Army of support. It may take many years, perhaps even into the next generation, to have a mature, irrevocable common law trust with built-in mentors, teachers, and a pool of unlimited talent. Here is another example. You are a member of a strong trust group, functioning for more than 20 years. Your sister has gone through a terrible divorce. Her inheritance is secure, though, because it has been held in the family trust since she was born. Her husband could not get one dime. Further, she not only has trustees who came to help her, but she also has access to legal counsel and an entire family army which supports her. The same could be true for the male members of the family. If the relationship is financially unequal, though, a separate trust may be set up for the wife, so she receives a distribution whether or not she remains married. Otherwise, the financial imbalance in the marriage may eventually create an overt long-range harm. Either the spouse hangs onto a bad marriage for the money, deceiving the partner, or becomes bitter because he or she feels trapped. Glue. What makes trust so powerful? It is something called glue. Glue keeps people together. Trust and a vested interest in the success of the group are the basic elements. The tighter we are bound together in supporting each other, the better our own chances for survival. In fact, the motive to stay together is the top priority, and financial gain should be second or third. There are many ways to get your needs met that do not involve money. How many people in the trades, such as carpenters, painters, and gardeners, exchange services with each other? How many people who are hands-on healers, acupuncturists, or have a healing talent in another modality trade services with each other? In fact, if you delete money from the system, everything goes to barter and trade. Barter and trade are what operated our world for thousands of years before the almighty dollar was invented. You might even say that riches lie in what assets others hold and are willing to share with us. When evolving support, these other values need to be incorporated regularly and consistently. We hope that we can inspire you to understand that committed relationships with vested interest form some of the greatest advantages a person could have. Choose your mentors wisely. You have a big dream to capture. Okay. Chapter 4, Rethinking Ownership. The greatest deterrent to putting assets in an irrevocable trust is giving up control. This chapter gives you an entirely different perspective about ownership. It belongs to me, right? Getting the goods of the world can be a wonderful experience. Further, strutting your stuff in ways ranging from subtle to blatant is considered proper, laudable, or even mandatory. Being the Joneses instead of trying to keep up with them is often a secret wish. It means being in control of your life instead of at the mercy of others. Or is this an illusion? Whether it can be a shopping spree, a new car, or getting a mortgage for a home, the lust to have is considered normal. But is it? There is a different way to look at ownership. As a lawyer told us, quote, the only reason they let you have anything at all is so if you do not obey, it can be taken away from you, unquote. What? You don't believe it. If you do not pay your income taxes, you can lose your home, your car, and anything else the IRS decides it wants to place a lien against. If you do not pay your country property taxes, your home disappears into the black hole of forfeiture. As a homeowner, you live with the threat, the constant reminder that if you step out of line, it may cost you everything. Lose your job, become involved in an unfortunate divorce, and all your hard-earned equity in the property can be claimed by the ex-spouse, the bank, the state, or the IRS. You owned it. You lost it. In fact, if you ask people around you about the state of affairs of their finances, you will probably discover some of them have lost it at one time or another. Here is another hard truth. According to a friend of ours who became closely associated with an ex-judge, the judge told her, quote, people never own their homes. That is why the state can take it when they do not pay their property taxes. Property only belongs to the state, never to the individual, unquote. We would like to give you a footnote on that, but for the safety of the judge, we cannot. We quote it here, though, because we have heard it several times, and even from a real estate agent we met at a spa while we were steaming in a mineral bath. In an astounding profession, she revealed this fact to several others in that hot pool. Some homeowners flatly did not believe her, and others were so shocked they fled from the pool in dismay. A hint the statement is true is found in the definition of land held in alloidial title. Quote, free, not holding of any lord or superior, owned without obligation of vassalage or fealty, and opposite of feudal, unquote. Do you own your own home in alloidial title? No, you own it in fee simple. Although these people who shared their knowledge about the true ownership status of property must remain unknown, We can send you to any law dictionary to look up the term fee simple. Property transferred in fee simple allows it to be inherited, not owned. You may wonder what the mysterious difference is between allodial title and fee simple. By answering a few questions and learning some obscure history, you can more fully understand. Do you want to pay for all the benefits of the county services? We mean, do you want to dig your own water well, supply your own electricity, provide your own fire and police protection? Probably not. Therefore, when you elect to pay county taxes, you also forfeit full ownership of your property. Obviously, allodial title is not practical. Unless you are ultra rich, fee simple is for you. This state-owned property fact is becoming more and more known, and if you ask around, it will be revealed to you by those who know. Why ownership can be bad. Taking the responsibility to pay off a home loan or buy a car on installment payments is something of which to be proud. We agree, except in the current corrupt climate of government and tax organizations, ownership could be a greater liability than most people realize. The politically savvy kings of ancient times knew all about this. They bribed the ordinary person by offering him a title and some land if he served in the king's army. As a bonus, he would see exotic foreign countries and find hard-won glory in distant battles. There was always, though, that sly little royal trick. For a commoner, now a knight, to hold the land took an army, and without the strength to battle the raiding brands of encroaching nations, this new little fiefdom was doomed. Now that same honorable knight must ask the clever king for help to defend his tiny plot of land and his family. For that, he had to pay a price. Whatever the price was, it involved some pledge that enslaved him to both king and land, and that hard-earned title became tainted with a different noble slavery. The serf on the land may have had a better arrangement than the hapless knight, obligated, laden with responsibilities and political schemes that complicated his life. Although this paints a dark picture and is perhaps dramatic to make the point, ownership can be leveraged others use against you. If you take this leverage out of the hands of others, could you find a new freedom? But you argue that without that mortgage, you would not have the present equity in your home against which you could borrow. Delighted that it turned out to be a forced savings program, you believe it a blessing to you. Not only were you lucky that you did not lose your home, but fortunate that you bought it where and when the real estate prices increased. Maybe you even paid off your home, continue to pay your taxes on time, and spend enough funds for home improvements and repairs. This is the upside down of your dream. But would you like to keep that home in the family? Or perhaps would you like to use your amassed equity in some way to benefit your family members? Why use is better than ownership? Ownership is stranger than fiction. If you form an irrevocable trust and transfer assets into it, such a residential property, the ownership becomes split. The beneficiaries have equitable interest and the trustees hold legal title. Now recorded at the county, the residential property is owned by the trust, and the trustees' names are listed as the responsible parties. As mentioned in Chapter 2, this is known in law as divided title, and no one actually owns the assets. The trustees are legally responsible for the assets in the trust and take care of the property, but only hold it for the benefit of the beneficiaries. A trust removes direct ownership. It takes money and property out of your hands where it can be used against you. Now in the hands of people removed from a direct involvement in enterprises, legal and financial complications are less likely. Property. In other words, if you own a home, have a bad automobile accident where you destroy another's property, the car insurance may not cover the damage. Usually the claim may require your home to be sold off to pay the debt. If you do not own a home, though, it cannot be forfeited. There is no asset for the plaintiff to claim. You say this is twisted? This makes no one responsible? This, though, is how most politically protected politicians configure their assets. They put them into what is known as a blind trust. These high officials in government cannot be sued for anything substantial. They have little in their name, perhaps a personal checking account and an old car. Since we cannot infuse morals and ethics into a society, we can only see to it that people are protected from frivolous lawsuits over which they have no control. For example, if you lose your job, your home can be lost, and then the IRS can hound you for years for back taxes. This is not true when you place your home in an irrevocable trust. It is removed from you, providing there are more than 18 months between the event and when you put the home into trust. The only time the trust, which holds the property, can be involved in a claim is if the trust, acting as a trust, causes the damage. For example, the Board of Trustees holds a function at a person's house. The trustees sign an agreement. The facility is to be used for 5 hours. During that time, the party gets rowdy and furniture and windows are damaged. Now the trust is clearly responsible for the harm and is responsible for paying the facility owners. What about marriage? Assets in a trust before the marriage remain in a trust, as they belong to neither the groom nor the bride, but to the trustees held for the named beneficiaries. Assets, excuse me, assets gained after a marriage can be community property, unless the trust buys them and keeps them for children of the newly married couple. The couple can also put new assets in trust for the children. We have one circumstance where a person had all his assets in trust and he wanted to marry a fine woman. He explained to her that he owned nothing as all his assets were in trust. She fled the relationship. One could say she was after him for his money, or maybe he did not offer to initially fund a trust for her. Gullible but rich. There is also the not so uncommon event where assets are in a trust and the gullible but not so beautiful beneficiary marries the dazzling princely rogue. If trustees are doing their job, the cunning husband wastes oodles of time and money going to court trying to get the well-protected wife's assets. He will eventually discover that she does not own them and that the trustees do not care about his plight. As a reminder, please do not confuse the word trust with a statutory living trust. In a living trust, property remains in the name of the original owner and is not removed into the names of the trustees. Therefore, a living trust offers no asset protection and only limited probate protection. This chapter exposes you to the potentially huge economic, peace of mind, legal, and tax advantages of having the use of property in an irrevocable trust without the headaches and legal exposures of ownership. Now, for a deeper understanding, it is time to share with you the history and evolution of trusts. Okay, Chapter 5. Trusts down through the ages. Armed now with at least a basic understanding of what a trust is and how it works, we turn to a historical survey of trusts. We address their antiquity, long tradition of use, and the reasons they came into being and have endured since. The earliest known writings are tax documents, and trusts date back to at least the time of the Egyptian pharaohs. The Bible documents the issue of inheritance through Esau when Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. This implies a formal arrangement existed in those days. We do not have details about these contracts, though. About 400 BC, Plato used a trust to form a sovereign university in Greece. In ancient Rome, only citizens inherited property. When a Roman chose a foreigner for his heir, though he could sidestep the citizenship need through a legal instrument known as a fideicommissum, similar to today's common law trust. The fideicommissum served one purpose and lasted only long enough to help the transfer of the property. It shows the need of a landowner to have a trust in another person to carry out the landowner's will after his death. Many examples of this procedure are in Roman judicial records. Church versus king. As early as the 11th century, English knights found trusts to be effective in safeguarding their property while they were away at the Crusades. Without this legal protection, they soon found the king was all too willing to confiscate their property to finance wars and other projects of his own. In response to this royal thievery, the warriors installed the church as trustee of their property during their absence. Only the emissaries of heaven had power enough to block the king's conniving. The sophisticated legacy of case law governing the conduct and responsibilities of trustees we find in our courts today grew as a result. The royal courts of chancery enforced the laws of trusts. The Mortmain Acts of 1279 AD, also known as Stadium de Viris Religiosis, I suck at Latin, forbade the church from owning land. The certain orders had taken vows of poverty. Those who wanted to give land to the church could do so only through the use. Abby, stop. Thus a third party held title and served under bond to handle the land. Today, this third party is known as a trustee. Medieval England provides excellent examples of the use. It was a way to enfiaf or transfer the legal title of land to one person or group while holding the use of the land for the cestacé use. The fivor, or another person or group known in modern language as a beneficiary, holding lease title to land under English common law carried with it many obligations. The lord of the land could claim a, quote, relief or money payment when the land descended to an heir of full age. If the heir was a minor, the landowner had the rights to wardship and marriage. When a daughter of a tenant married, or a son knighted the tenant held for ransom, the lord became entitled to, quote, aids, unquote, that is, more money. The use avoided these extractions while still letting the cestacé use enjoy the benefits of the land. To avoid the feudal burdens and obligations to care for the land that came with the death of a single fiafi. Several fiafis could serve as joint tenants. Scholars of medieval English land law note the religious bodies were among the first to employ the use extensively. Massachusetts Trust. When the English colonized North America, the use changed into the trust, and the colonists brought the idea with them. They further developed the idea by devising the Massachusetts Trust, which is almost synonymous with a business trust. They did this in part because it literally took a special act of Parliament to secure a corporate charter to acquire and develop real estate. The trust gave them a way to pool their resources without having to deal with state-imposed controls and burdens. Some trusts currently in the United States have existed longer than the country itself. They provide benefits to countless heirs beneficiary, as well as many communities. By using a common law trust and not a government-granted charter, a trust operates with greater freedom and far more privacy. By providing a common vehicle for the self-interests of its beneficiaries, a trust teaches the lessons of interdependence, cooperation, and working together for the common good. The Privy Seal and the Queen. Queen Elizabeth I was notorious for robbing her subjects of their money. Whenever her spies discovered a merchant made a profit, she immediately sent agents to borrow it through an agreement known as the Privy Seal. She never paid back any of her debts. Historians note that this practice contributed to keeping the feudal system in place during her entire reign. Those subjects who had the ability to create riches either hid them well or left to England. Thus, this monarch unintentionally contributed to developing trust among rich private citizens and to protecting assets by the clergy. Early American trusts. Later in Pennsylvania, Governor Robert Morris of the Virginia colony, an English-born Philadelphia banker, a member of Congress, and the financier of the American Revolution, set up a trust named the North American Land Company, which remains in existence today. Similarly, Patrick Henry also set up several trusts, which are now more than 250 years old. The descendants of these famous patriots, some of them still in leadership roles, achieved durability for their family trust by carefully training each successive generation to understand and apply sound legal and financial principles to trust management. As reported in the Chicago Tribune, March 22, 1947, the Chicago Merchandise Mart is a pure trust established by Joseph P. Kennedy. John D. Rockefeller established more than 270 pure equity trusts, which kept his vast empire sovereign and beyond the reach of inheritance taxes and other government intrusions. Ugh. The U.S. government itself allegedly created thousands of trusts, including the U.S. Constitution, Medicare, and federal highway programs. The latter fact posted on highway signs along interstates, especially during times of construction. We know that administration skills allow a trust to continue. We devote many pages in Volume 2 to the subject. Dark side. We would be seriously lax, though, if in our discussion of trust we failed to discuss their other darker side. This is a story not only in relentless, multi-generational self-aggrandizement, but of the manipulation and direct involvement of the U.S. government in support of that agenda. The resultant chapter in this nation's history became so black that learning about it is compulsory for the U.S. school children to this day. Further, it would be fair to say to many, this is what the word trust means as a visceral emotional level, or at a visceral emotional level. In the late 1800s, certain major American industrialists developed the practice of concentrating their assets into associations or combinations in restraint of trade. Unfortunately for the reputation of trust, these individuals twisted the long-established trust methods into a new shape to reach their goals. Though termed trusts and outwardly imitating the traditional pattern, in reality, the conglomerates they created violated the basic ethical purpose of trusts, to care for the family. They poured their immense resources into the petty games of self-protection and self-aggrandizement at the expense of their other people. These brilliant but short-sighted industrialists fixed monopolies, manipulated material costs and product prices, nullified free market competition, corrupted the media, and dominated Congress. As we have seen before that period, trusts were used by the private sector as a shield against the abuses of kings, queens, and legislators, not as a crud gel to smash business rivals. Yet, as industrial age technologies concentrated increasing amounts of power in the hands of ever fewer men and corporations, Lord Acton's maxim "power corrupts" took a new turn. Instead of consolidating their power in the private sectors to stabilize families and better provide service to their customers and the community, they abused their position, crushing competitive initiative and reducing service quality to end users. Clearly, government invention was justified, and it had to come from the federal level. The shift of power out of state houses and into boardrooms was carried out by several of these associations, whose influence now crossed not only state borders but national ones as well. Increasingly independent of local markets, regulations, and boundaries, these would-be masters of the universe gave the time-honored techniques of trusts new roles never intended by their predecessors. Seemingly over the financiers' objections and despite their ability to buy votes, Congress passed the antitrust laws banning monopolies. Predictably, the executive branch failed to carry through and enforce them, as shown by the fact we still have an oil cartel and few industries show true competitive pricing. In large cities, the overall trend is that mom and pop stores have been driven out of business by larger chains whose volume buying power results in pricing significantly lower than individual stores can offer. On their face, these laws appear straightforward, genuine examples of the democratic process at work, embodying the masses' demand to curb big money's abuses of power. Public outrage was present, doubtless further inflamed by the hired pens of William Randolph Hearst and other yellow journalists. At least some of the members of Congress who proposed and passed the trust-busting legislation had a different motivation from the voters, though. Like lawmakers in other eras of democratic government, they followed the theme, quote, "Government is the art of extracting votes from the poor and wealthy from the rich by promising to protect each from the other," unquote. The attention made lawmakers take seriously their duties as public servants. They took action against the real danger posed by the giant industrial trusts to the economy and the nation, thus winning the vote of the little man. In reality, they provided those same wealthy captains of industry with the federal firepower to blow their competitors out of the water. Even though it appears the separate companies became different oil companies, they have not competed. Do they fight amongst themselves? We think not. As Michael Parenti notes in Democracy for the Few, progressive repression. In the 20th century, as in the centuries before, the men of wealth looked to the central government to do for them what they could not do for themselves, to repress democratic forces, limit competition, regulate the market to their advantage, and in other ways bolster the process of capital accumulation. Contrary to the view, the giant trusts controlled everything. Price competition with small companies in 1900 was vigorous enough to cut into the profits of various industries. Suffering from an inability to regulate prices, expand profits, and free themselves from the vexatious reformist laws of state and local governments, big business began demanding action by the national government. As the utilities magnate Samuel Insull said, it was better to, quote, "help shape the right kind of regulation than to have the working kind forced upon us," unquote. While the billionaire bankers and manufacturers who owned representatives in Congress drafted the laws supposedly aiming at busting trusts, the obvious targets of these laws simply changed their tactics. They restructured their complex trusts into holding corporations and carried on much as before. As usual, the competition was left to its own devices, first to discover the new game and then how to play it. The public stigma, which became attached to the term trust at the beginning of the last century, explains why the public has not searched out the techniques of wealth building used by these past masters. Like masters of psyops, the rich may well have anticipated their reverse psychology campaign, which funded both sides of the debates. This is now standard operating procedure for pushing controversial legislation through Congress. By making it uncomfortable for people to use trust, they will never learn the secrets. Genuine or not, the drama, sensationalist press campaigns, political cartoons, and flowery oratory of the era turned the American public strongly against this artificial entity. Even now, more ordinary folks have a hard time seeing themselves associated with a trust, let alone creating one. Nonetheless, students of trust who can keep an emotional distance from the events of yesteryear stand to gain a precious lesson. The instrument used by Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, and others to amass their polypolistic power, upheld and expanded by their beneficiaries, has precisely the same shape, although not the same purpose or contents, as the one we examine in this book. That fact, perhaps more than any other, may help you understand why rich private interests and the government agencies which claim to curb them keep such secrecy about the uses of these powerful devices, and why it is not taught in the schools they fund. Some assume the reason attorneys lack information about common law trusts is the wealthy, who control the curriculums, have no motive to share their strategies. We do not favor or support monopolies or abuses of power by private interests any more than we do tyrannies or dictatorships by Caesar, kings, or congresses of the people. Having and using a trust will either ensure that your own behavior is ethical or make up for any other flaws or character, intelligence, experience, or training. We would be lax in our duty as educators and members of the community, though, if we downplayed or ignored the enormous potential for power which remains in this family business. This is precisely because it encourages those who care most about you to support your dreams and supplement your strengths with their own. The knights of old England used their trusts defensively as impenetrable shields against the king. The robber barons of Wall Street turned theirs, though, their weapons to clobber their competition. How you develop and use the power of the trust you create largely depends on the scope and purity of your purpose, and neither of those is a known nor a fixed quantity. One fact is certain, though: just as surely as nature loathes a vacuum, if you fail to explore and exploit the blessings which life gives you, someone else will take them away. You can hide from them, bury them, surrender them, abuse them, ignore them, waste them, cry over them, or laugh at them. Or you can nurture them and those who contribute to them, develop them, protect them, add to them, share them, explore them, and maybe someday even grow to understand them. Tribal power. Tribal power exists in current trusts today, especially through the DuPont family, which has a shared interest in not only trusts, but corporations, partnerships, and limited liability companies all across the world. Even though the DuPonts are not registered as holding a majority of stock, the family votes in blocks. This is how it controls many of the boards of trustees and board of directors in various organizations throughout the world. Cataloged in a book entitled The Rich and the Super Rich, the DuPont family is similar to the Rockefeller in all the other major families. These power dynasties long ago discovered that voting as a unit is where political leverage remains. In other words, the tribal strength of agreement. Contrary to our own belief that rugged individualism is almighty and desirable, the opposites is the truth. Collective agreements are what controls this world. A handful of conclaves developed and matured to take the leadership of our planet. Unfortunately, most such groups are not strictly focused on the welfare of the people. They use financial leverage through group agreement. And this is the great power of the irrevocable common law trust, a force not available through the average statutory trust. The leverage of a united family available through the common law trust is what provides its unique place in the world. And as long as the United States Constitution and the state constitutions secure our right to contract, the irrevocable common law trust stays, also giving the average middle-class family collective leverage. Let's see. Okay, I might be able to get through one more. The feudal system and the common law trust. Although we cannot quote an exact source about the term common law, we can assume that common means to share, as in common good. In feudal England, the common people equally shared the land. Both the freeborn and the serfs cultivated strips of land known as sea lions, which were 220 yards long by 5.5 yards wide. Researchers believe there was an effort to give each household an equal chance to cultivate some of the good land of the township with the poor, and thus these sea lions were scattered. Because they were scattered, the land became common to the people. The common law is based on shared resources. We have all heard the term feudal overlord. That is the leader or the overall landowner. The term landlord comes from this tradition. In that time, though, the feudal lord cared about the get the better deal and in the fair distribution of the resources. the people worked the land. Although considered little better than animals to the feudal lord, his serfs were an asset, without which the land could not become productive. Thus, while there were taxes, it was not the norm to abuse the serfs. There is an idea that if a person is tied to the land, he is enslaved. This has also allowed them, though, to be secure in their homes. The idea they could not leave to work some other land may or may not have been a matter of concern. In viewing the feudal age, though, our modern sensibilities, we may not see reality as the serfs saw it. Even in America, eventually the slave owners came to realize that if the slave was well kept, he or she not only lived longer, but became more cooperative. By the 1850s, many slaveholders had become more aware of the need to increase food allotments, maintain more sanitary living conditions, and provide adequate clothing and shelter for their slaves. Although this effort became greater more than 150 years of slavery, or after more than 150 years of slavery, we only bring our attention to this matter to compare it, not to excuse it, and to broaden the definition and idea of what slavery might be. This is in contrast to today, where corporate management disassociates itself from the worker and takes no personal liability for his or her welfare. People are discarded when of use no longer. This may be through downsizing or retirement. The worker is then supported by the state in the form of unemployment and medical benefits. Instead of an overlord who has an interest in the worker's welfare, we have a near machine-like mechanism that handles people with indifference and sometimes downright neglect. For example, welfare programs and child services. As society evolved, the idea of sharing became less centralized until shared resources is mainly within the family. Without the support of the family, members do not have a firm foundation in life to carry them into new adventures and to give them the courage to learn and take the necessary risks to grow. The idea of any trust is to provide the financial basis so the family members can contribute to society from a position of security instead of uncertainty. When you must focus on gathering enough to simply make it through the week or a month, there is not much time to devote to helping others, contributing to the community, or to developing yourself. Those who have built up this family power base for generations are those who are in power today. For generations to come to be in a position to manage to the common good, families must set the foundation now to have enough leverage in the future to be of benefit to this world. Oh, okay. We only have a little bit more to finish this chapter out. I'm going to go ahead and continue. The ulterior motive. Besides addressing the mundane legal and physiological reasons for creating a trust, we are taking a massive departure from the familiar. The presumability safe tradition of legal and historical facts will now segue into what many of you find out there. Rest assured, though, there is a good reason for doing so. Find hidden in the antiquity of history is one of the hottest political footballs of all time. This subject remains questionable even today. Without bringing it to your attention, though, you would miss the background of what compels the super rich to use trusts. Beneficiaries be damned. The real purpose of the trust for the super rich is to accumulate and protect assets for themselves. Ancient rulers who literally took their servants and treasures to the grave with them could, were they here, but look in awe and envy at the boldness of the scheme. The rich are motivated to create wealth so they can reincarnate back into their own bloodline and thus inherit their resource structure. They not only keep their material comfort, but also their leverage. Because of the controversial nature of the subjects of reincarnation and other esoteric themes in general, we feel that we should address these beliefs more fully in Appendix H. Here you will find the more amazing details of some of the rituals of the major organizations and leaders of our world, and understand more thoroughly why they have such an intense motivation to accumulate wealth. This one area is probably the demarcation line between those who seek power and those who choose to live their lives to the fullest capacity without concern about how or when they come back, or even if they do. In bringing this point of view to light, we are not offering or suggesting it is correct, only it is probably a strong motivator for some. Okay. Ooh. It's a good thing I stopped here because I'm starting to lose my voice. All right. So, does anyone want to bring up anything that we just read about, or have any questions about anything we just read about? No one has anything they want to bring up?
You did a great job. You're a very good reader. Thank you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I gotta train my voice a little better. Okay.
I don't know how you did it.
Well, this isn't my first rodeo. I got to like chapter 8 on my other channel reading to others, but then I just kind of gave up. But next time, I think I want to share the wealth and, maybe give other people a chance to read a chapter or two as well. Okay, then let me ask you all some questions if you're not going to ask any questions yourself. Who's the grantor? Or what is the job of the grantor?
The creator of the trust.
Correct. What does it mean to have a living trust? And is it revocable or irrevocable?
Well, since I have a background in this, I'll let others answer.
Joe, was that you? Were you unmuting?
I said it's revocable.
Correct. It is revocable. And what's the basics of a living trust?
Oh, before you go further, it's revocable until death. Then it becomes irrevocable.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's revocable during life, I guess. Life of the grantor.
Is it
right?
still a living trust, like just an irrevocable living trust, or does it become a different type of trust once the person dies?
It becomes irrevocable based on the terms and conditions of the trust indenture. They become fixed.
Okay, but it's still known as a living trust?
Legally, perhaps per se, but in fact, it reverts to irrevocable. So its title will remain the same, but its operation becomes different.
Right. What is the role of a trustee? And you guys don't make poor Joe answer all these questions. Somebody's got to speak up. In private, nobody already knows this stuff. Y'all need to take a stab at this. What is the role of a trustee? I'm going to start calling on you guys. Justin, what's the role of a trustee? Oh man, did I put him to sleep again? Is everybody asleep? Is anybody awake?
I'm awake.
To sleep? Okay. So, Elle, tell me, what is the role, just the basic, you don't have to know like everything that they do, but what is the basic role of a trustee?
The basic role of a trustee is, I'm going to assume it's the person that takes care of the money and stuff. The
All
person
right.
that's in charge.
Exactly. The person that makes the call about the building the trust, giving, making it more financially lucrative. And who can be the trustee, and how many trustees can there be?
I can be a trustee, and you can also appoint a trustee. Well, I can't be a trustee over my own affairs, but I could
Let's
appoint
do
a
this.
trustee.
Who appoints the trustee?
Me, the beneficiary, right?
No, the grantor appoints the trustees.
Oh, okay.
And it said that one of the trustee, if you're going to do more than one trustee, which is smart to do because you need 2 signatures, that should you have family members, say you were going to do 2 trustees, should both of them be family members? Yes or no?
No.
Correct. Can any of them be a family member?
Yes.
Correct. Okay. Maybe I should do yes or no questions for y'all to answer.
Before you go further, regarding the role of the trustee and everything else that has been said so far is true. But in the technical terms of it, he is the one that is vested with legal title and to work on behalf of the beneficiaries to their profit or to their benefit. So that's basically sums up what a trustee does. He holds legal title and he works on behalf of the beneficiaries for their benefit. Ayo.
Okay. So with that in mind, oh my God, I just had the question. Okay. Yes or no? Can a grantor also be a trustee?
Yes.
Correct. Right, Private Nobody?
In very limited circumstances. Generally speaking, no. But there are certain circumstances where the grantor
Be the beneficiary.
can be a trustee. The grantor can be a beneficiary. But generally because you don't want equitable title and legal title in the same hands, because that merges the trust and it's no more. So title has to be split. So it should never be in the hands of one person. So say, for instance, the grantor is the beneficiary. He has no control over the legal title. But to have the trustee be a beneficiary, that merges or extinguishes the trust because it's in one hand. Trust is based on split title. I yield.
Okay, guys, true or false? The most common type of trust is an irrevocable trust.
I agree.
Wrong. That would be false. The most common type of trust is a revocable living trust. What we just talked about. What makes a trust irrevocable?
Death.
I think that's right. Is that right, Private Nobody? Or can the grantor still?
Okay. It's actually two ways that I'm aware of. It's either by structure within the trust indenture, or if it was revocable and the grantor dies, then it becomes.
I just found the answer to that. Okay, so it says grantor can establish an irrevocable trust anytime during his or her life.
Correct.
And once he or she places funds into the trust, that person no longer owns them. So
correct.
If it's irrevocable and the grantor creates an irrevocable trust and puts money into it, that money is no longer his.
Correct. Any asset that goes into the trust becomes trust property.
Right. And the funds are the responsibility of the trustees in the name of the trust, and the grantor is neither responsible for them nor pays any taxes or increases. So that's a way to kind of be tax-free. Now, you don't own the property or anything anymore. Now the trust owns the property, but you still have you're still a beneficial owner, correct?
It depends on how it's set up. But generally speaking, when a grantor establishes a trust, he's doing that on behalf of either family or business interests outside of himself, and to absolve himself of liability. So, just like the common law trust that goes back all the way back to the Crusaders' time, because I think that's when it really started to gain favor, was during the Crusades, where the knights, when they went, they would have their property held in trust to protect and to absolve liability of the estate. And they use that and with corporations sort of as a shield for liability. So trust really had nefarious reasons for its development, especially on demand, because there is a trust also under God's kingdom. And what Satan did it where it was meant for good. He flipped it around and used it to do evil with. So the original intent of trust by man was not for a beneficial use of the community, but for self or for groups. And it's pretty much that way to this day. This is one reason why Christian Walters, who we give credit for bringing trust and equity to our community way back, and I think it was around the early 2000s. And through his development and learning, he wound up moving from, the statutory trust, the common law trust, and he, towards his latter end, I think the last 2 or 3 years of his life, he devoted to scriptural trust, biblical trust, that had some elements that was flipped on its head with man's trust, which were inspired by the adversary. So the way trust has been used since around 1100 AD until now has not always been for good of the world. It's good for the few.
Right.
So keep that in mind also.
Okay. Can a grantor be a member of the board of trustees? EJ or EG? EGH? Yeah, EG.
I don't think so, because like Private Nobody said, it's in a way kind of commingling. So you would have to kind of establish what your role is regarding the trust.
Actually, the grantor can remain as an advisor.
Okay.
Actually, not to be, I don't think you can be on the board of trustees, but you can be an advisor on the board of trustees.
Because it's your trust.
Yes, he doesn't have voting rights, though. He can only be an advisor.
All right, cool. So you were sort of right. So can the beneficiaries, JACs, right? That's how you say it, JACs. Can the beneficiaries make decisions for the trust? Or Joe or anyone that knows, can a beneficiary make decisions for the trust? This is sort of a little bit of a trick question.
So I think they can make requests from the trust, but they can't make trustee decisions.
Beautiful. You get a star for that one.
And in addition to that, and if the beneficiary is aware of the trust indenture and the responsibilities and liabilities of the trustee is known, they can issue directives based on the trust indenture, but they cannot individually compel the trustee to do anything unless it's in the trust indenture. So the beneficiary have very little power. They're to, like somebody said, the trustee runs the show and the beneficiary receives the benefit. That's it, generally speaking. But if a trustee is going rogue, then they can step up and apply the trust indenture against the trustee. And rogue trustees are known. As a matter of fact, when they're caught out there, and most of them are lawyers, they're treated very harshly. The system does not like attorneys or anybody else as a trustee that goes rogue. They get dealt with harshly.
Don't be going rogue, y'all. Oh, and by the way, I screwed up that question about the revocable trust thing. It's the most common revocable trust is a living trust. That's one everybody does. Now, in a living trust, can you get out of paying taxes? Anybody want to take that one? Yes or no?
I thought all taxes were elected.
Like taxes, like property taxes or anything like that. In a living trust, do you still have to pay taxes? Does the grantor still have to pay taxes? Because it's a revocable living trust. Do you have to pay taxes?
That's a good question.
Yes.
I think it said something about it. Like I remember reading something about that.
Well, this is where jurisdiction comes into play. Now we know the living common law trust is not part of the United States jurisdiction. And then if you put assets in the trust that is out of the jurisdiction, you may not have to pay taxes per se. It depends on the business activity of the trust, because you can have business activity that bring you back into their jurisdiction.
But a revocable trust, you still own the assets.
What's that again?
I said in a revocable trust, don't you technically still own the assets? Doesn't the grantor still own the assets? It's only with revocable that they no longer own them.
At death, no, but it irrevocable during life too. But the fact remains, once the grantor assigns title to the trust, the grantor no longer has ownership. The ownership is the trust itself. And if the trust itself is outside of the jurisdiction of the United States, because you see where they kept talking about statutory and common law,
Right.
That's a big difference. Statutory will always be under the domain of the United States, Washington, D.C., and its state-of-state franchises. So taxes will be required. Not always with the common law trust. And in some situations, absolutely no, the way it's designed, especially if they go like 3 levels deep between different entities, then they can't get to it. So that's another reason why the rich use trust to get out of most liability. May not be all, but I would say 80% of liability they can get from under.
So the appropriate answer would be sometimes then, right? Or depending on the situation or the type of trust.
I'd say
Yeah.
depending on who organizes the declaration for the trust.
Which is generally the grantor who signs off, even if it's done by an attorney. Do you know a lot of attorneys are not even allowed to create private trusts because it's against the interest of the United States? Yeah, some of the things, pure trust, common law trust, a lot of those types of trusts, either they do it for the wealthy, but they won't do it for the common man because it's considered against the policy of the United States. Because remember, an attorney of the bar is part of the United States.
Right.
As an officer of the court. And I've heard that over the years. Like pure trust, attorneys don't touch that at all.
So do they typically create statutory?
Yes. That's what most of their work in trust is, statutory. Because that's working with the government.
So why am I getting feedback? Okay, nobody, turn down your volume. I don't know if that's the problem or not. But with a revocable trust, also, it's imperative that you get a trustee, like a successor trustee. So if you pass away and you don't have that, then all of that work you did to build that trust goes right out the window because it could end up going to probate if you don't get the person, you don't establish an official trustee and get their, because it says the grantor adds the name of the successor trustee to the bank account. So you've got to add all of their names to all your bank account stuff. I ran into this because I had to go into probate when my mother passed, and it was a pain in the butt. And I spent a lot of money going through probate. So all she had was a handwritten will. And luckily my siblings were like, okay with me handling it because I was the only one out here, but still had to go through probate. So if you do a living trust, a living revocable trust, just make sure that whoever is going to be your successor trustee, that because the grantor still can actually be the trustee up until the time that they pass for a revocable living trust.
Yeah, because generally speaking, a trust can't survive without a trustee.
Right.
So that's why you want to plan ahead.
Let's see. My dog is like, get me outside. I need to go potty. Hey, Private Nobody, can you take over asking questions? Oh, wait, it's almost 8 o'clock.
Can I say 4 minutes?
Okay, so next time, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have questions in advance written down for everyone. But yeah. So I don't know. I might have some questions next time for things that we read this time. So on Monday, I'll have questions that go over what we just read. Maybe that will be a better thing. And that way you guys can review it. And if you guys have any questions that pop up, if you guys want to read ahead, write down questions to ask or whatever, just to be a little bit more prepared. Or we could just do it in the sense that we read. And then the next time we do Q&A, we will have questions about the stuff we read previously and kind of keep doing it like that. Anyways, and if I really have enough time, I might even do like a little quiz I'll send to you all. But anyways, okay, I think that's it. Unless anyone has any other questions they want to bring up right now specifically. No, nobody? Everybody's good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely helps me. Like I have big time issues with reading, and then my list of things that I need to read has built up so much that I start to get all freaked out, and then I procrastinate everything. So I'm like,
Same
no, I don't
here.
want to read
Same here.
anything.
You're not alone.
Thanks again.
But yeah, absolutely, guys. And we'll try to get through as much as possible next time. If anyone wants to volunteer and like read, I would be also greatly appreciative of that. But if you want me to read, that's fine too. And I guess I will see you on Monday. When is the time change supposed to wait? Did we already do a time change?
I don't know if California opted out of that or not, because I know on the news last year they were talking about it, about us not going back into it, and I haven't heard anything else on the news about that.
Yeah, no, I think California is still a go with that. But
Okay.
Justin, you said Sunday?
Tomorrow night, but yes.
Right, yes. Okay, well, then don't forget about the time change on Monday. And then I will see you guys because my dog is like all over me. She really needs to go pee. So I will talk to you guys later. I will upload this. And hopefully I can upload it to that specific folder. But I will upload our audio so other people can listen to it. You can re-listen to it or whatever. Okie dokie.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Be blessed. Peace be.
Yes, you guys.